Hi, everybody. In this video, we're going to look at another type of chart or graph called a scatter chart or a scatter plot. So a scatter plot is basically used for when we have XY data. So we're using those two axes and we plot them as individual points. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so we're going to start with just a very small scatter plot. And I have our unit 4 workbook open, and I'm in the volatility and return tab at the bottom. So that's the data that I'm going to look at. And I'm just going to start by selecting B5 through C7. So very small data set here. So we're comparing volatility with the annual return or 10-year annualized return rate. So I just basically have 2 data points in this case. And then I also have my labels here selected as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hit insert. And again, you could insert charts at this point in different ways. So you can see the scatter plot right here at the top, which looks like a series of points. So you could do that right away. Or if you prefer, you could go to recommended charts and you can see it right here. So your scatter plot looks like individual points that are plotted. So I'm just going to go ahead and click that and click OK. All right, we are going to move this chart because again, it's a little bit too much to see on this one page. And I have cleaned up my document, so I started fresh for this video. I kind of got rid of all the other charts we've been doing. So I'm going to go put this on my summary sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and move that chart there. So I'm going to go ahead and click the Move Chart button over here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to create a new worksheet. I'm going to go ahead and place this on my summary worksheet. And we can see that it was moved there. So let's fix this a little bit because we really can't see anything. Oops. All right, let's go ahead and undo that change. And I want to select my whole chart and move it, not just the title. So I'm just going to kind of just take a moment here and move this over. And I'm going to line it up right here. All right, and again, you can, your book does tell you where exactly they want you to put it. I'm just going to put it right there, though. I think that looks like a good spot, so that works for me. So there is our chart on our summary page. So what I want to do next is I want to play around a little bit with some of the features as I've done in our other videos as well here. And I'm just kind of looking at my notes to make sure I don't forget to go through anything particular in this case. All right, so we can play around with the different axes here. So notice right now it's going from 0% to 5%. So Excel will use the data that you have and pick a scale that they think is appropriate, but you can change that. And I can change it by double clicking on that scale. And then you'll see that a box will open up here on the right. And if it's not selected, you do want to be in this one here that looks like columns, and that will kind of have all of your chart options in this case to do with the axes and things like that. So we can leave our minimum at 0, but maybe you would like it to go up to 6% instead. Notice here that because of in percent notation, they're using the decimal form. So 0.05 is 5%. So maybe I want to change this to 6%, and I can go ahead and hit enter on that and make that change on the vertical axis, for instance. Okay. And again, you can kind of just scroll down here and see your other options. So for things like units, horizontal axis crosses, and so on here. So we're set to automatic. Your book suggests playing around with this, so you can set the axis value instead, and they recommend using 0.031 instead. So you can see that that horizontal axis now goes from 0 up to about the 3% mark there, just above the 3%. So you can play around where those axes are on your grid. Being a math person, this kind of makes me crazy. I'm not going to lie. I like my axes to go from 0 at the bottom. But if you're doing a different chart or you're trying to show something different, it is helpful to know that you can adjust where those axes are. So I'll kind of follow along with your text and just go through some of that. So when I'm done with that, I can also go ahead and click on my horizontal axis. And again, make some changes here too. So it does start going from 0 to 20 here. And remember, that was based on volatility. So I'm going to double click that. And again, I can change it. So maybe I don't want to start at 0. Your book suggests let's start at 4 and then go up to 24 instead. So again, you can play around with these axes if you find that helpful. And maybe want the vertical axis to cross instead at 14.71, using that first point as our marker there. All right, so you can see that I've adjusted where the axes are. I've adjusted my scaling a bit as well on the horizontal and vertical axis. Again, this is helpful to know just in case you do need to change things. Being a math person, I do like my things to be a little bit more organized and starting at 0 and 0, but that is my preference there. But you can manipulate if you do find that helpful. Or if you have data where you don't need some lower values or some really high values, you can, truncate those axes if it helps display your data more accurately. So that's the key thing here is we always want to display our data more accurately and not make it confusing for the reader. What they do suggest here as well is getting rid of some labels and things like that. And getting rid of some of those grid lines in the back because it is a bit cumbersome to read here. So we can go ahead and do that. So I can get rid of some of the labels, again, by clicking on the axes. That's one way that you can do it. So if I double click the horizontal axis again, and I scroll down, I do see I have a label section here. If it's not open, you can click it to open it, and you can change your labels. So here we have the labels next to the axis, but I can make it as none if I choose to, and you can see that it cleans up that piece there. And you could do the same thing for the vertical as well. So if these labels are confusing, again, you can change the position of them, or you could also have it go to none. Oops, let's see here. All right, so then now all those labels are gone. We just have the 2 main points and kind of those cross axes here for right now. We can also click, remember this little plus sign here to look at our chart elements. So you can edit that as well. So maybe you would like to remove your chart title. You can get rid of that. For the grid lines, if you select over on the right, again, you can get rid of the grid lines there as well. So this just has, kind of basic information here. Really kind of pared down on our labels and so on. So I'll let you, again, play with this at home, but you can add and move axes and get rid of labels and add labels and so on. Really depending on, what you're looking for in that chart. So for me personally, again, as a math person, I do like to have labels in my charts, enough so the audience can follow along. You don't want to have too much going on or else it gets very difficult to read, right? So we don't want to do that. But you do want to have at least enough information in your charts so that the audience can follow along and know what they're looking at. But again, here are just some ways that we can kind of play around and tweak and just edit our graphs and make those changes as we see fit. All right, so another thing that we can do as well, and again, there's lots of things that we can do here, and this is just some of them, right? Again, I can add in axes titles, I can take those off, I can bring my grid lines back in if I want to, add in a legend and so on. So there's lots of changes that I can make there as well. The other thing I can do too is, let's say I would like to add more data to my graph. I don't have to start all the way over from the beginning and kind of like redo everything. So maybe I'd like to have kind of two sets of data. So here I have my first set, and you can see the points are in blue, but maybe I'd like to add a second set of data to this graph. I can go ahead and do that as well. So what I can do there, if I do want to add some more data, you can see up top here. Again, I'm just under chart design. It's a little hard to see everything with Zoom open. You can hit select data. And you can see in the background, it's showing me what I have selected. So this was my original selection for the data. And again, you could change this, right? If you want to add a second set of data, though, that you would want to be distinct, right? So you don't want to just combine it into all one thing, but you want to say, hey, there's two sets of data here. What you can do as well is hit this add button, and then you can go ahead and select more data. So I'm going to go back to that volatility and return screen, and I'm going to add my other information here. So I'm going to add this G column as well, basically, to my data set. So I'm going to hit G5 as my label. And then I do need to tell it my X and my Y values. So I'm going to use, again, this right here. I need volatility, and I do need your Y-axis data. So our percentages there, the returns, and I'm going to go ahead and select it. So for my X-axis, I'm going to let that be my volatility. So I'm going to go ahead and select here all the way down. And notice how I'm on the X series. And then for my Y series, I'm going to delete this. I think I clicked something by accident. And I'm going to go ahead and select and drag down to the bottom of my Y series there. So you can see that I'm just telling it to, hey, let's add some more data here. And then the series name is going to be other investment funds in this case. All right, I'm going to hit OK. And I'll see that data here, right? So I can see I have two data sets that I'm really looking at on the same grid now. And let's hit OK. And then now you can see that second data set is in green there. So we are keeping them as separate data sets. So we're kind of adding two data sets here to the same graph, one in blue, one in green. The blue ones being the first ones that I had there. So S&P 500, for instance, and SNRFD. And then the green ones are other funds. So they're kind of a mixed group of funds there. But that's pretty nice to see kind of those two data sets added and that you can change and you can, add to your graph and things like that. Another thing that we can do is we can add what are called trend lines. This is actually really common to do, particularly in statistics and things as well. So I could right click on any of the points in my data set. So obviously I have blue data and I have green data, right? So on the blue data, I can right click on that. And then if I scroll down, I can see add a trend line. And Excel can actually calculate the best fit lines for you. It is defaulting to linear here, but you could look at the data and see which line would fit best and change it. So if I think exponential data fits best, or logarithmic, or a power function, then I can go ahead and change that as well. So you do have to have a little bit of knowledge of those different types of functions. Those are things that you would see if you take our 162 course. So it's basically like a college algebra course. And you would see all those different types of functions, but Excel can go ahead and change those. Now you can see that it goes just to the points here, but you can extend it. So if you want to forecast, you could extend the lines out in both directions. So I could extend it forward 2 periods and maybe even backwards 2 periods, and you can see how that line extended. Maybe I want to go backwards 6 periods and I can extend that line further as well. So you can use that to help forecast. And you can even display the equation that they're using here if you find that helpful. R values, so some of this you may not understand unless you took stats, but this is some good stats information here as well. And you can do the same thing for the green. So if I right click on the green, again, I could add a trend line. And again, it's defaulting to linear here as your best fit. But if you look at your data, perhaps you think a polynomial is a better fit, or a log function, or exponential, and you can change appropriately. I'll stick with linear here. And again, maybe I will extend out, 2 periods to the right and maybe 2 periods to the left, or maybe we'll do 4 to the left, and just kind of extend those lines a little bit further. And again, we can also display our equation as well. So that can be helpful just to kind of show the general trend of the data. And that is used for different kinds of functions, but I think you see it the most really with linear. A lot of people try to put a that linear equation over data that does appear to be linear, right? So we only use trend lines if the shape appears to be accurate, right? So there are more tests that we can do about trend lines, particularly if you take statistics, you'll learn a little bit about that at the end. So there's a little bit more math behind it than just what is here. But the big thing is that you want to make sure that your trend line matches the shape of your data. So for instance, with this green data here, if I don't feel like this looks very linear, and it kind of doesn't, maybe very slightly linear, I wouldn't want to put a trend line in, right? So I would do that when it makes sense or when it's helpful. All right, a couple other little things here. You can add call out features to your scatter plot as well. So maybe I would like to label the points and things like that and actually show a little bit more specifically the different funds. I can do that as well here. So I'm going to go ahead and see, make sure I'm in the right section. All right, so I had to rearrange my Zoom screen a little bit there. So here I'm going to show you how to do those call out features. So I'm going to make sure my graph is selected, of course. And then you see chart design and you see format up here. So in the format area, you want to go over here on the left, and you're going to select the information basically that you're focusing on. So I want to call out the 10-year annualized returns for those 2 main funds, right? It was the S&P 500 was one of them. So I'm going to click that. And you can see that that highlights just the blue data, right? If I want to select something different, if I want to do the other funds, and then it's selecting the green data, or I could select my trend lines and things. So I'm going to select the blue data there. And you can see that they are highlighted. And then I'm going to go ahead. Let's see. So I'm going to go back to chart design up top here, and I'm going to click add chart element. And then I see data labels right here. So that's what I'm looking for. Right now there's none selected. You can see you can kind of play around with different categories here that just, add in some of that data. The one I'm going to look at are called data callouts. So you put like a little box around the data instead. I'm going to go ahead and start by selecting that first. Once I have those in, I can go ahead and edit them as well. So I can click on either one, and we're just going to right click here. And I apologize, my mouse is being a little bit weird, which is why I'm pausing my video a little bit. So I just right click on that. And then you should see down here, format data labels. And I can go in there and I can click that. So right now you can see the X and Y values are part of the data labels, but you can change that. For instance, I could use value from cells, and then I can select what I actually want in there. So I'm going to go back to my volatility sheet here. And I'm actually going to select the fund names instead, because I think that would be more helpful, and hit OK. And you can see that that did change on my chart. But this is very cumbersome now, right? It's very kind of cluttered looking. So now that I have my chart names in there, instead, I'm going to get rid of the X and the Y value. So I can use the X and Y value as my labels, or if I don't want to do that, I could select different labels to use like I did here. So I'm able to go ahead and change that. So let's close this for a second. So it looks like this now. And again, I'm just kind of playing around with different features just to kind of show you some of them. You can also go ahead and keep making changes here. So if I go and click on my chart, and then I go up to the Insert tab, I also have lots of different things that I could I could do here as well, and change and insert other features too. So I'm going to go into illustrations. I'm going to go to shapes here. And under shapes, you have lots of different shapes that you could use, of course, but you also have a text box feature, which could be really nice. And you can go ahead and just kind of put that text box in, and then I can go ahead and label this. So your book recommends we write high return. And then in the, see, type high return as the first line of text, and then type low volatility. And I'm going to go ahead and tweak this, right? So I'm going to make this a little bit wider. I'm going to make this text box a little bit longer. I'm actually going to move my text box. So I can move it to different corners that I want to here. And so on. So again, I can kind of play around with these features as I want to, and move my text box around. I can also go in here and change the font. Oh, I hope I don't move other things around as well. So again, I could go in here and change my font, etc. Change the color, whatever I want to do to those text boxes. And I can add them to, all corners or anywhere I want within the graph to provide extra information there. So that was under the insert feature, under illustrations, and then shapes. And again, of course, I could add shapes as well, but that text box feature is right there as you're looking. All right, one more kind of graphic thing I want to show you guys is that we can add graphics as well. So I'm going to get away from the chart for a second here. And I'm going to go back to my summary. Actually, I am on my summary sheet. I'm going to scroll up on my summary sheet. Move my picture here. And I do see here something called let's just say 4 stars, not 4 starts. I apologize about my typing. 4 stars. So I could also add little kind of mini graphics here. So this is not a scatter plot, but it's just another kind of thing that you can insert that you may find helpful, like I just showed you with the text box. So maybe I actually want to put 4 stars in instead. I could go ahead and do that. So I can just, again, go back to insert and illustrations. You can use the shapes there. So I do have a star shape. Let's see, where is my star shape? Is there somewhere? Oh, right here. So you guys are probably seeing it faster than I am. Or you can also go into icons and search for different shapes. So I could try searching for a star, and I get different options here. So I might just use the filled in star. I'm going to insert that. And I can also edit this. So when you go up top here, you can manually adjust it, right, by using this feature here and just dragging. But you can also change the height and maybe make it a 1/4 inch instead, and it will adjust the width as well. So that 1/4 inch looks pretty good. And I'm just going to try my best to kind of get it in that box. I want to make 4 stars. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to do Control Copy for copy, and then I'm going to hit Control V for paste. So I have a 2nd star, and I'm going to do another Control V for paste. So I have a 3rd star and another Control V for paste. And then I have my 4 stars there. So I do have that feature as well. And again, you can add those even to charts and different charts and worksheets and etc. Now, one last thing I will show you here in this particular piece for inserting things is that it is really difficult to try to align these, right? Like if you're playing around, it's kind of like, well, how do I get them to look nice and space them well? And they kind of look a little bit off, right? So you can fix the alignment if you have multiple symbols like this that we're trying to insert. So I have just choose one of them to select, and you'll notice that up top you'll have a graphics format tab. So I'm just going to go ahead and click that. And one of the features is align, but we're going to do something first. The first thing you want to hit is selection pane, and just make sure that all of the graphics are selected here. So again, they're just labeled kind of randomly, but if you hit Control and you hold down, you can select the graphics. So I have all 4 graphics selected that I want to deal with. So this selection pane will show you all graphics you have. I also have a chart, right, that I just made. So I'm not going to select that one. I'm just going to select these ones here. And then under Align, you can use this to help you. So you can align it to the middle so that they all kind of even out this way. And you can also distribute horizontally so that they're spaced horizontally correctly as well. And then if I unselect them, you can see what they look like. If you don't really like that, if they're not, kind of lined up, sometimes it helps to just rearrange them a little bit and try again. So I'm going to align middle again. And then they all actually fit in the box this time. So sometimes if you find that they're a little too high in the cell, make one of them drop a little bit lower and try realigning again, and it will sometimes fix that. Or if one of them, if they're too low in the cell, put one a little bit above, and then again, do that realign feature. And it helps there. So those are some tips to, again, just kind of make your charts more interesting and make your worksheets more interesting as well.